Welcome back to Newsday. Joining me live in the studio, we've got Labor MP Sam Ray, Liberal MP Aaron Violi. Gentlemen, great to see you both. Sam, what's your take as a former, strategist as well in the party and so on? You look at Werribee by-election, look at the polling, the Redbridge polling that has support for the Albanese government in the outer suburbs falling quite significantly as well. Where are things at for Labor just a couple of months out from federal election day?
Kieran, I'd say two things about the Werribee by-election. Firstly, it's a state by-election. It was fought on state issues. And, of course, we're going to come to a federal election in due course. And that federal election is going to be a contest between a federal Labor government who have dealt with the inflation challenge, tried to help out households with these cost of living challenges where it's been responsible to do so. And, of course, on the other side, we've got the Liberal Party with Peter Dutton, who has confirmed that he'll make cuts, but he's keeping it a secret where he'll make them. And he's going to take that money and buy everyone a lavish lunch if you own a small to medium-sized business. So I think people...
So do you think voters in your part of the world will differentiate between state and federal? People
do absolutely differentiate between state and federal, Kieran. They are smart. Voters are smart just because, some in the Liberal Party like to look down on working people. Working people know what's going on. They're not silly. They can tell the difference. By all means, they will also let their views be known along the way as well. Now, the second part that's interesting about Werribee is there was a swing against the Labor Party, as you noted, but the Liberal Party really didn't pick up many of those votes. They sprayed around a bit. And so if the Liberal Party think that they can represent working people are saying to them that is not the case. So
with the vote spraying, do you think that Peter Dutton can, with a good campaign, attract most of that vote towards the Liberal Party?
Well, there's lots. I hope Sam and I saw Katie Gallagher and Mark Butler have all said nothing to see here. We're not listening to the people of Werribee and Victorians, and I hope they continue that because whether it's state or federal, yes, people know the difference between state or federal, but they also know when there's an opportunity to send a message. And they remember in Victoria the fake barbecue between Anthony Albanese and Daniel Andrews, and they know Jacinta Allen. It was there every step of the way with Daniel Andrews, all endorsed by Anthony Albanese and Labor. There is definitely brand equity there. Sam would have been around in 2018 at the state election, and there was many people that voted at that state election because of their frustration and anger at federal Liberal Party at the time. That was really clear. So there is always some overlap. There was messages to be sent, 10%.
So you'll pick up some seats in Melbourne?
Well, we've got to continue to keep doing the work, Kieran. You can't take anything for granted. We've seen with the polling, we've now seen in Werribee and Prahran, where we were able to win that seat back, that there is definitely... Labor weren't even prepared to run a candidate in Prahran. They were trying to avoid scrutiny from voters in Prahran. A government not running a candidate, what does it say about how scared they are at a state level in Victoria? There's more work to do, we know that, but we've continued to put forward positive policies while holding the government to account.
What do you have to do in the outer suburbs of Melbourne? You know them well. Your own seat covers a fair chunk of it. What do you need to say to those people who feel maybe they've been forgotten?
Kieran, Labor is always the party that works relentlessly to deliver for working people. That is our cause. That is why I'm here in the parliament. It's why my colleagues in the Labor government are here in the parliament. We've got a relentless focus on the needs of those families, those households in those outer suburbs, people who rely on their labour to derive an income. And their life has been quite difficult. The global inflation challenge that our economy has faced has been very difficult. And, of course, we know that Scott Morrison and the Liberals left Australia with an inflation number that was above 6%. We've more than halved it. We've finally been able to get real wages growing again. It's been a tough period. Some people are still doing it tough. We are very focused on getting those household economic issues moving again. We're heading in the right direction, and people don't need the cuts that Peter Dutton are going to impose upon them.
So with that message, is that a risk for your plans in Victoria, for not yours personally, but for the party's plans? This message, this threat, this doubt about the spending and cuts?
Well, it's the continual political spin from the ALP, because the reality is Anthony Albanese, the Treasurer, the government, Sam, they don't have the ability to campaign on what they've delivered for the last 2.5 years because they have not delivered for the Australian people. Whether you're in the inner suburbs, the outer suburbs, there's no Australian that's doing better today than they were 2.5 years ago, despite this Prime Minister promising, committing to reducing power bills by $275. He failed. He promised cheaper mortgages. Interest rates are up 12%. He promised that he would get the cost of living crisis under control. grocery prices up 12% since this Prime Minister came to power. He has failed on every measure over the last 2.5 years, and that's why
if there is
the government...
a rate cut next week, which many economists believe there will be, Westpac today saying inflation trimmed to mean, underlying inflation, however you want to call it, will be 2.4% by the June quarter this year. We could have 2 rate cuts before the election.
We could, or we could have them staying the same. We're delving into hypotheticals, but what...
Would that be important, though, politically, in terms of the psychology and the momentum? Or you don't think that's enough to make up for the...
There's a high level of frustration. We're talking, if we get a rate cut or 2, that doesn't replace the last 2.5 years. Real disposable income is down over 8% across the last 2.5 years. People are still struggling. Sam talks about real wages at a very top macro level. Real disposable income is down. We've been 21 months of a per capita GDP recession. Essentially, households have been going backwards for 21 months under this government. I know the Treasurer and the Prime Minister likes to talk about the top line, but families are struggling. They haven't recovered. Every time the government talk about Peter Dutton,
Aaron,
it's because they've got no answers
It's a
for the
word
Australian
salad.
people.
What are you going to cut? What is Peter Dutton cutting? You're cutting health, you're cutting education, you're cutting roads. The Australian people deserve to know what Peter Dutton is planning to cut if he's given the keys to the lodge.
Scare campaigns are all you got, Sam. Peter's already said, we've said as a coalition, we're not going to cut frontline services, but there is absolute waste in the public service that has to go because we've got budget deficits as far as we can see. My community knows about cuts. We know about the road cuts, $100 million to seal roads that the Prime Minister committed to before the election that he cut. Mental health sessions cut from 20 to 10 under this government, despite a report saying that it should stay. So it's pretty rich for the government to talk about cuts when there's been plenty of cuts. We've got $11 billion black hole because they're either going to cut the public service or they're not going to pass on the 11% wage increase they committed to. If you look at my EFO, plenty of questions that this government's not prepared to answer when it comes to cuts, when it comes to budget responsibility. They're the government. They should have some answers.
This is going to be central to the campaign. The main thing is, I guess for many, in terms of their kitchen table budgets, is the issue of interest rates. Did that Westpac forecast today in terms of inflation, does that give you a bit of hope? Do you think that 1 or 2 cuts would be enough to help give the government a bit of momentum? A message to those mortgage holders that that the worst is behind them?
Kieran, I've been very clear about my personal view on this. Australian households, mortgage payers, deserve an interest rate cut. Now, that's a decision for the Reserve Bank and they are an independent organisation. But my view is that Australian households deserve an interest rate cut. They have carried the can while we have seen our way through this very challenging global inflation challenge. I agree with Westpac, as I do with a number of the other commentators and analysts out there, that it's time for an interest rate cut. Should
the senior figures in the government articulate your message as well?
Unfortunately, I don't get to dictate what the senior figures in the government.
But as a backbencher, you feel like you can.
As a wild old first-term backbencher here, and I can wax lyrical on such things. These are things that matter in my community. My job is to represent the people of Hawke, and in my community, our people need and deserve an interest rate cut.
Thank you, Sam Ray, Aaron Violi. Gents, we'll see you next week.
Authorised by Aaron Violi, Liberal Party, Lilydale.